Many of us are still carrying over Thanksgiving celebrations this Saturday, and we're meeting up to celebrate the holiday with our family and friends, talking about the Pilgrims and Squanto, which leads us this week to ask the question, did Shakespeare know Squanto? Squanto was an American Indian born in the Patuxent tribe in the late 16th century, and he died in 1622. He's famous in the United States as being an Indian who helped the Pilgrims when they came over to the New World. He mediated between them and the local Indian tribes and helped the Pilgrims survive the harsh winters here by teaching them how to plant and grow food in an environment and a climate that was new to them, and they were not successful on their own. He really helped keep them from dying and was instrumental, if not essential, in making sure that they survived and went on to be able to establish the country. He's a figure that is heralded as a hero by most people in the United States, and we celebrate his life and contributions to the country on Thanksgiving. Now, what's interesting about Squanto is he does have a connection to William Shakespeare. Now, not all explorers and travelers were looking to peacefully start a new life in the New World the way the Pilgrims were. There was a massive amount of bloodlust and focus on capturing the Native Americans and enslaving them, even taking them back to London and putting them on display as artifacts from a new world. They were treated as less than human. And it were these exhibitions that allowed Squanto and Shakespeare to cross paths in history. Exploration to the New World was in full swing while Shakespeare was writing his plays in London, including when Shakespeare was writing The Tempest, which has a lot of themes about ocean travel, exploration, conquering islands, and things of this nature. In 1605, an explorer named George Weymouth was sponsored by Henry Wriothesley, who was famously Shakespeare's patron and friend. He and his friends sponsored an expedition for Weymouth to go to Upper New England and see if there was an area of the country that was good for a settlement. A report about the voyage when they returned back to England talks about how these explorers met up with Native Americans and talked about trade. Now, the report doesn't give a lot of explanations as to why this happened, but at some point in their interactions, the English settlers decide to kidnap the Indians. And so 3 of them through deception and 2 of them through actual force, they captured 5 of the Native Americans and took them back to Europe, where they were given as gifts. Now, there is a book that was published in 1658 that claims Squanto was one of the Indians that was captured then and given as a gift. Later historians have since disproved that claim and believe that Squanto was not one of those Indians. One of the Indians that was captured, however, was Epanow. Epanow was famously taken to London, and he didn't speak any English, and all he could say was the word welcome. And he was put on stage. I'm going to cry trying to tell you this story. He was put on display in London and made to say welcome over and over again. And he was very imposing figure. He was massive, and he was a striking visual specimen in contrast to the English. And this was around the year 1610 when Shakespeare was writing The Tempest. And one of the quotes in The Tempest is, Trinculo says, when they will not give a doit to relieve a lame beggar, they'll lay out 10 to see a dead Indian. Epanow was exhibited as a physical marvel, and he was even kind of a colloquial expression, a funny phrase by people who frequented coffee houses and taverns. It was probably Epanow that Shakespeare was mentioning when he talks about a strange Indian in his play Henry VIII. He says, what should you do but knock him down by the dozens? Is this more fields to muster in, or have we some strange Indian with the great tool come to court? And they were talking about Epanow. That one of the phrases about Epanow was the very rude statement that he had a great tool. And so most historians are almost certain it was Epanow that Shakespeare's referencing in Henry VIII. What's interesting about this is after the kidnappings and after all of this had occurred, the stories of Ipanow's treatment got back to the Native Americans, and there was a massive amount of disgust, fear, outrage, and pain caused by the English coming to the US and deliberately deceiving, tricking, kidnapping, and essentially torturing the Native Americans. This treatment was long remembered, and it's one of the reasons that Squanto's help was so essential to the pilgrims that came over here peacefully, and that Squanto is worthy of so much remembrance and honor and gratitude today, is because when the pilgrims came in 1621, by the time the pilgrims got here in 1621, the Native Americans were wise to the English ways and they were ready to kill the pilgrims. In fact, in 1621, the Nauset Indians refused the advances of the first Mayflower scouting party and attacked them. Even when the English settled at Plymouth, which was far away from the Nauset Indians, the natives haunted that settlement from a nearby hill. It would be Squanto that stepped in to mediate discussions between the pilgrims and the Nauset on Cape Cod. And there's one story where a woman who was at least 100 years old comes out to meet them, and she couldn't look at them. She couldn't talk to them without breaking out. The quote is, the experience is recorded as, quote, without breaking forth into great passion, weeping and crying excessively. She told them about how the English settlers had stolen her 3 sons, and now she was deprived of her children in her old age. And many people saw the Nauset's actions as avenging Ipanow. And Squanto's mediation with the Indians is also reported as one reason the English discovered how much pain was remembered from the actions of these explorers. Now, as far as Squanto's life, John Smith records that Squanto lived in the city of London, and William Bradford was the Englishman who knew Squanto best and most sympathetically, and he records that Squanto lived with a man named Slaney. Now, there are no records to suggest Squanto and Shakespeare knew each other. I don't know that they met one another, but with the culture of Indians on display that was going on in London right when Shakespeare was a prominent figure in the community there, it's hard to imagine Shakespeare wasn't at least aware of Squanto as well as Ipanow. Obviously, he was aware of Ipanow with his references in Henry VIII. So it's kind of a sad, tragic story this week about Shakespeare and Squanto, but the histories of the English and the United States are intertwined this way, and we don't often study it that way. We look at Shakespeare as an English figure who has nothing to do with the United States, and it's not true. Henry Wriothesley was a huge fan of Shakespeare, and Shakespeare's works were some of the books that were coming over on all of these explorations back and forth across the Atlantic. So his influence on the New World is profound. I would encourage you to check out the book called Transatlantic Encounters, American Indians in Britain from 1500 to 1776. It's a powerful book, and it is a powerful look at the culture of England as it relates to the United States and American Indians during Shakespeare's lifetime. I'll link to that book below. The link I'm including is an affiliate link. You're welcome to use that link. It doesn't cost you anything extra. There's a sample of the book available on Google Books, and I'll put that in today's show notes as well. So you can definitely learn more about this. So that's it for this week. My name is Cassidy Cash, that Shakespeare girl, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. We are still filling our Life of Shakespeare tour. It is going to be happening in September of 2019, but the registration deadline is February 1st. That means we have to have 8 people signed up for this trip to be a go, and I want you to come with us because when we get to go as a group, there are really awesome extras that we get to do that they don't make available to individuals. So if you just go to England yourself, you can't take a private behind-the-scenes tour of the Globe Theatre or get historical costume guides to rock you around Hampton Court Palace, but you can do all these things and more if you travel with us as a group. So if you, your friends, your book club, your colleagues, or someone that just likes Shakespeare and wants to know about this trip, please forward them the link. It's CassidyCash.com/travel Shakespeare. We will be taking bookings up through February 1st. If we have 8 people at least, then the trip will be a go and we'll continue taking registrations. But if we don't get 8, then we can't go on the trip at all. And I know I really want to stand inside Banqueting House and recite The Tempest with you. Sign up now, and I'll see you in London.